Admiral Kyung-ho stood on the bridge of the Prometheus watching, as his massive fleet emerged from the dimensional fold at the edge of Council space. The ship beneath his feet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, built using both human engineering and ancient technology. It was more than a vessel. It was a work of art that could reshape reality itself. Behind him stretched a fleet of 3,000 ships, each one unique and beautiful in its own way. Some looked like crystalline, flowers that bloomed with inner light. Others resembled flowing metal sculptures that changed shape as they moved through space. A few were living vessels grown from modified space organisms that responded to their crews' thoughts and emotions. "Sir, we are receiving over 800 communication requests," Lieutenant Bo Young announced from her station. "Species from across the galaxy are asking to join our fleet. Many are saying they have been waiting their entire lives for someone to finally stand up to the Council." Kyung-ho smiled as he listened to the reports coming in. The Council had exiled humanity to prevent them from influencing other species. Instead, their exile had given humans the freedom to become something that naturally attracted every intelligent being who dreamed of a better life. The human colonies had become a beacon of hope that could be seen from one end of the galaxy to the other. Dr. So. Young approached carrying a datapad filled with diplomatic requests. She had grown from a young scientist into the director of xenological relations, and her face glowed with excitement. "Admiral, the preliminary negotiations are going better than we ever dreamed. The Catherian Republic wants to formally ally with us. The Andorian free worlds are ready to join our confederation. Even some of the Council-owned client species are secretly sending us messages of support." The journey to Council space had taken 3 months, not because the distance was great, but because they had stopped at every system along the way. Word of their coming had spread faster than their ships, and everywhere they went, they found beings ready to embrace freedom. Entire planets had declared independence from the Council. Before the human fleet even arrived, young Captain Huan Jin commanded one of the escort vessels, and he brought news that made everyone cheer. "Sir, the Volan system just broadcast their declaration of independence. They are asking for our protection while they transition to self-governance. The message says they refuse to live under Council oppression for even one more day." The most amazing thing was that humanity had not conquered anyone or threatened anyone. They had simply existed as an example of what was possible. When beings across the galaxy saw cities that floated in the sky, farms that turned deserts into gardens, and societies where every voice mattered, they realized they did not have to accept the limitations that had been placed on them. The final confrontation came not as the massive battle the Council had prepared for, but as something far more powerful. When the combined human and allied fleet arrived at Galactic Prime, they did not attack the heavily fortified Council stations. Instead, they broadcast a simple message across all frequencies throughout the galaxy. "People of the galaxy." Admiral Kyung-ho spoke into the communication array, his voice carrying to billions of beings on thousands of worlds. "We come not as conquerors but as friends. We offer you the freedom to choose your own path. Join us in building a galaxy where every species can reach its full potential, or continue to follow those who demand you remain small. The choice is yours, and yours alone." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Communication networks that had been controlled by the Council for millennia suddenly filled with voices that had been silenced for generations. Beings who had never been allowed to speak began sharing their dreams, their hopes, their visions of what the galaxy could become. On the mining world of Kepler 9, workers laid down their tools and declared they would no longer extract resources to enrich their Council overlords. On the agricultural Planet Harvest, 12 farmers announced they would feed their own people before shipping food to the core worlds. On 100 factory worlds, beings stopped making weapons and started making art. The Council tried desperately to maintain control. Prime Minister Zorvath appeared on every screen demanding obedience and threatening punishment for rebellion. But his words fell on deaf ears. Beings who had lived in fear for centuries suddenly found courage in the knowledge that they were not alone. The revolution spread faster than the Council could respond. Systems that had been loyal for millennia declared independence in the span of hours. Species that had never worked together began forming alliances and mutual aid societies. The rigid hierarchy that had controlled the galaxy for 10,000 years crumbled like a house built on sand. Commander Dalsu was monitoring Council military communications when he brought urgent news to Admiral Kyung-ho. Sir, their fleet commanders are reporting mass desertions. Entire crews are abandoning their posts rather than fight against beings seeking freedom. Many are requesting asylum in human space. The Council made one final desperate attempt to maintain their power. A massive battle fleet led by their most loyal species moved to attack the human confederation. But as they approached New Terra system, something unexpected happened. Ships began breaking away from the Council formation one by one as their crews refused to fire on beings who only wanted to be free. Admiral Vorkast of the Gellan Defense Force was the first to switch sides. His ancient voice crackled across the communication channels as he addressed both fleets. I have served the Council for 300 years, believing I was maintaining order. Now I see that I was only maintaining oppression. I will not fire on those who seek the freedom my own people deserve. Within hours, the Council battle fleet had dissolved. Half the ships joined the Human Confederation, a quarter returned home to defend their own worlds, and the remainder simply scattered to the outer rim, rather than participate in what they now saw as an unjust war. The end came, not with explosions and death, but with a simple choice. Prime Minister Zorvath stood in the great crystal chamber where humanity had been exiled years before, but now he stood alone. Most of the Council representatives had abandoned their posts to return to their home worlds. Others had fled to hiding places in the outer systems. Ambassador Deho entered the chamber where his species had once been judged and found the ancient ruler sitting in his floating chair, looking older and more tired than ever. You cannot govern the galaxy without us, Zorvath said, his voice barely a whisper. We have maintained order for 10,000 years. Without our guidance, there will be chaos. Deho looked at the being who had once seemed so powerful and felt only sadness. You maintained control, not order, he replied gently. You created stability, through stagnation, peace through oppression. We offer something you never could: the chance for every being to become more than they were yesterday. The transformation of the galaxy took less than a year. The Galactic Council dissolved as species, after species chose freedom over security. The ancient tribute systems ended as worlds began trading as equals instead of masters and servants. The rigid caste systems that had divided beings by species and birth were replaced by societies that valued ability and character. In place of the Council rose the Galactic Confederation, a voluntary alliance of free species working together as equals. Humanity found itself not as rulers of this new order, but as its founding members, helping other species discover their own paths to freedom and prosperity. Governor Sang-ho spoke at the first Confederation Assembly held on New Terra with representatives from over 2,000 species. They expected us to fade away when they exiled us, he said, to the cheering crowd. Instead, we became what they could never be: truly free. And now the entire galaxy shares that freedom. The galaxy had learned something that the Council had spent millennia trying to hide. Freedom was not dangerous because it led to chaos. Freedom was dangerous because it led to growth, innovation, and the kind of rapid progress that made those in power irrelevant. And across the stars on a million worlds, beings looked up at the night sky and smiled, knowing that for the first time in galactic history they were truly free to reach for those distant lights. Ambassador Vextar paced back and forth in his private chamber aboard the massive space station that orbited the Council homeworld. His 3 eyes were wide with worry, and his tentacles kept twisting together in knots. The reports from the outer rim were impossible to believe, but they kept coming in day after day, getting worse and worse. Sir, his aide Cole 9 entered the room carrying a stack of data crystals. The readings from our monitoring stations are getting stronger. The energy signatures from human space now exceed anything we have ever recorded from a new colony. The numbers suggest they have industrial capacity that matches our oldest core worlds. Vextar stopped pacing and stared at his aide. That cannot be right. Without our technology and guidance, they should barely be able to maintain basic life support. How could primitive humans build anything significant in just 5 years? but the evidence was overwhelming. The automated sensors placed at the edge of council space were detecting energy emissions that defied explanation. Massive construction projects that seemed to appear overnight. Transportation networks that moved ships faster than anything in the known galaxy. Communication systems that carried more data than the entire council network. Even worse were the refugees. The first few had been ignored as unimportant malcontents who always complained about council rule. But their numbers were growing every day. Entire families were abandoning their homes in council space and heading toward the human frontier. They spoke of opportunities and freedoms that sounded too good to be true. Intelligence operative. Null 6 brought the most disturbing news of all. Sir, we intercepted transmissions from a Cytherian merchant vessel that visited human space. They report cities that float in the sky, farms that produce 10 times normal yields and technology that our scientists claim is theoretically impossible. The council chamber erupted in chaos when Null 6 presented his full report. Hundreds of alien representatives chittered, clicked and buzzed in their various languages as they tried to understand what they were hearing. The humans they had dismissed as dangerous primitives had apparently built something that surpassed their ancient civilization. How is this possible? Demanded Prime Minister Zorvath, his voice carrying the authority of 10,000 years of rule. We are the inheritors of galactic wisdom. We have maintained order and stability since before most stars. We're born a young species cannot simply surpass us in a few years. Trade Administrator Kixlock brought even more troubling information. Our economic projections show declining productivity across all sectors. Without the constant innovation that humanity provided, our technological advancement has stopped. Meanwhile, preliminary analysis of captured human devices suggests they have achieved breakthroughs we considered impossible. The captured devices were the most frightening evidence of all. A small crystal taken from a human trader could store and process information faster than the council's largest computers. A piece of metal no bigger than a coin could generate enough power to run an entire city for a year. A communication device, smaller than a fingernail, could send messages across the galaxy instantly. Defense Minister Kex 3 stood up on his mechanical legs and activated a holographic display. The images showed human ships unlike anything in the galactic database. They moved without visible engines, appeared and disappeared at will, and seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics. These vessels were spotted near the Andorian system. Last week, he announced, their speed and maneuverability exceed our best military ships by orders of magnitude. If they wanted to attack us, we would have no defense, but the humans were not attacking. That was what made the situation even more terrifying. Instead of conquest, they were offering something far more dangerous. They were offering hope to every species that had ever felt oppressed by council rule. Sociologist Dr. Yuntar presented her analysis with trembling hands. The human colonies are not just technologically superior, she explained. They have created a social system that maximizes individual potential while maintaining collective cooperation. Crime rates are practically zero. Happiness indices are beyond our measurement scales, and their rate of innovation is accelerating rather than stabilizing. The report described communities where every being had a voice in decisions that affected them, where creativity was encouraged instead of regulated, where young people grew up believing they could achieve anything they dreamed of. It was everything the council had spent millennia proving was impossible. The most damaging evidence came from defectors, members of client species who had visited human space and returned with stories that spread like wildfire through the outer colonies. They spoke of worlds where beings were judged by their abilities rather than their species, where ancient racial hierarchies had been abandoned, where cooperation replaced competition. A Gellan engineer named Vor-12 had returned from New Terra with plans for energy systems that could revolutionize galactic civilization. When questioned by council security, he simply said, "The humans do not keep knowledge secret like we do. They share everything freely, because they believe that when everyone grows stronger, the whole galaxy benefits." The council faced a crisis unlike any in their long history. Their entire system of control was based on the belief that they were necessary for civilization to function. But here was proof that species could not only survive without them but could thrive beyond their wildest imagination. The younger council members were the first to panic. What if other species learn what the humans have accomplished? Demanded Representative Sol 8 of the Bryaki Collective. What if they start questioning why they need our guidance? What if they realize they have been held back instead of helped? Fear spread through the chamber like poison. Each representative began to imagine their own species abandoning the safety of Council Rule 4, the dangerous freedom that humans offered. The carefully maintained balance of power that had kept the galaxy stable for millennia was starting to crumble. Economic projections showed disaster looming. Without the tribute from client species, Council core worlds would face shortages and decline. Without the constant flow of new ideas from subjugated peoples, their technology would stagnate. Without the fear and respect that maintained their authority, their entire civilization would collapse. But the most terrifying possibility was that the humans were right. What if freedom really was better than control? What if innovation really was more valuable than stability? What if the council system that they had believed was perfect was actually holding back the entire galaxy? Prime Minister Zorvath called for emergency session after emergency session, trying to find a solution to the human problem. Military advisors suggested invasion but admitted their forces were inadequate. Economic specialists proposed trade warfare, but the humans were already self-sufficient. Diplomatic experts recommended negotiation, but the humans had nothing to gain from rejoining a system that had exiled them. The final straw came when 3 entire star systems declared independence from the Council and requested to join the Human Confederation, the Nexari Republic, the Volan Free Worlds, and even some of the Council-owned client species were ready to abandon millennia of tradition for a chance at true freedom. We cannot allow this to continue, Zorvath declared, his ancient voice shaking with rage. If word spreads of what they have built, it will inspire rebellion across the galaxy. Species will abandon our guidance for their false promises of freedom. The natural order will collapse into chaos. The vote was unanimous among the core council species. The human experiment in freedom had to be stopped before it infected the rest of the galaxy. They would launch a massive military campaign to destroy the human colonies and prove once and for all that their system of control was the only path to true civilization. As the council prepared for war, they told themselves they were saving the galaxy from chaos. But deep in their hearts, they knew the truth. They were not fighting to protect order. They were fighting to protect their own power. And for the first time in 10,000 years, they were not sure they could win. Captain Hyun-sik stood on the bridge of his ship watching the stars move past the window like tiny diamonds scattered on black cloth. His ship, the New Dawn, was one of thousands carrying human families away from the worlds they had called home. For generations, the great exodus had begun, and there was no turning back now. 3 months had passed since Ambassador Daeho walked out of that crystal hall, and everything had changed. The moment word reached Earth about the exile, the entire human government went into emergency mode. Every human colony, every space station, every mining operation got the same message. Pack everything you can carry because we are leaving Council space forever. The speed surprised everyone. Even the humans themselves could not believe how fast they moved when they had to ships that had been sitting in repair yards for years were fixed in days. Cargo haulers that normally carried food and supplies were converted to carry families and their belongings. Factory ships started working around the clock to build everything they would need for life in unknown space. Hyun-sik remembered the day his own family got ready to leave New Seoul Colony. His wife Soo-jin had cried when she packed up their daughter, Hae-rin's toys and books. They had built a good life on that world with a house overlooking the Purple Mountains and friends who felt like family. Now they were giving it all up for a future no one could promise would be better. But something amazing happened during those 3 months of preparation. As humans worked together to organize the greatest migration in galactic history, they started to remember things they had forgotten. For 50 years, they had followed council rules about what they could build, where they could go, what they could study. Now, with exile hanging over them, those rules suddenly did not matter anymore. Yoon-ji was the first to realize what this meant. She was the chief scientist for the colonial fleet, and she had spent 20 years trying to get permission from the council to study quantum physics. The aliens always said it was too dangerous for a young species like humanity to understand such things. Now, as she worked in her lab on the transport ship Horizon, she finally had the freedom to explore ideas that had been forbidden. The breakthrough came 3 weeks into the journey. While most people were sleeping in their tiny cabins, Dr. Yunji and her team were working on a problem that had puzzled human scientists for decades. How could they communicate across the vast distances of space without using the Council's expensive and slow network? Young Taemin was only 19 years old, but he had a mind that worked differently from everyone else. While other people saw problems, he saw patterns and connections that no one else could understand. He had been kicked out of 3 council-approved schools for asking too many questions that made his teachers uncomfortable. On that night, Taemin was staring at equations on his computer screen when something clicked in his brain like a key turning in a lock. He saw how quantum particles could be connected across any distance, instantly sharing information faster than light could travel. It was so simple and beautiful that he started laughing out loud. Dr. Yunji rushed over to see what had made the young man so excited. When she looked at his work, her eyes went wide. This was not just a breakthrough. This was a revolution. If Taemin was right, humans could build their own communication network that would be faster and better than anything the Council had. Within days, word spread through the fleet about the discovery. Engineers and scientists who had been scattered across different ships started working together through video calls, sharing ideas and building on each other's work. Without Council bureaucrats telling them what they could or could not do, human creativity exploded like a dam bursting. Captain Hyun-sik saw the change in his crew and passengers. People who had been sad and worried about leaving their homes started to get excited about what they might find in the unknown regions. The ship's engineer, Seok-jin, came to him with plans for improvements that would make their engines twice as efficient. The medical officer, Dr. Yoon-ah, figured out how to grow fresh food in spaces that had been considered too small before. 6 months into the journey, the scout ship sent back news that made everyone cheer. They had found it. The Kepler cluster, a group of 47 star systems so far from Council space that no alien government had ever bothered to explore it. The first reports were almost too good to believe. Dozens of worlds perfect for human life. Rich asteroid belts full of rare metals. Energy sources unlike anything in the known galaxy. Lieutenant Bora was working the communication station when the detailed surveys started coming in. Her job was to organize all the information and send it to the other ships in the fleet. As the reports flowed across her screens, she could hardly believe what she was reading. "Captain, these worlds are incredible," she called out to Hyun-sik. "The third planet in the Kepler 7 system has 3 moons and oceans full of life. The continents are huge with rivers and forests and mountains that make Earth look small. And sir, the energy readings from some of these stars are off the charts. The scientists think there might be natural phenomena here that could power entire civilizations." Hyun-sik felt his heart racing as he listened. This was not just a place to survive. This was a place where humanity could grow into something greater than they had ever imagined. The Council had tried to exile them to the worst part of the galaxy, but instead they had pushed them toward paradise. The most amazing discovery came from the deep space probe sent to explore the outer edge of the cluster. Dr. Minho was monitoring the probe's transmissions when it found something that changed everything. Ancient ruins on a dead world, structures so old that they made the Council species look like children. The ruins were not just old, they were advanced. Beyond anything the current galaxy had ever seen, the probe's scanners detected technology that still worked after millions of years. Energy systems that drew power from empty space, materials that could repair themselves, transportation devices that could move objects across impossible distances instantly. News of the ancient ruins spread through the fleet. People started to understand what had really happened. The Council had not exiled humanity to punish them. They had accidentally freed them from a cage that had been holding back their true potential. Out here in the wild frontier, there were no rules except the ones humans made for themselves. No limits except the ones they chose to accept. Soo-jin was a young graduate student working with Dr. Yoonji when she made the connection that tied everything. Together, the quantum communication break through the rich worlds of Kepler. The ancient technology, it was all connected. The ruins belonged to a species that had once faced the same choice humanity now faced. Bow down to those who claimed to be your betters or strike out on your own to find freedom. They chose freedom, Sujin whispered as she studied the probe data. And look what they became. They built something so advanced that even after millions of years, we can barely understand it. When the human fleet finally arrived at their new home, they found worlds more beautiful than anything they had left behind. The first colony ships landed on New Terra, a planet with purple skies and silver seas, where the mountains reached so high they disappeared into the clouds as families stepped off the ships and breathed the clean air of their new world. They realized something important. The Council had called this exile, but it felt more like coming home. For the first time in 50 years, humans were free to be everything they could become. The real adventure was just beginning. The verdict of fools. The giant crystal hall of the Galactic Council was full of strange alien sounds and smells that made Ambassador Deho want to hold his breath. The air was thick and heavy like soup, and the lights were too bright and too colorful. For human eyes, he stood alone in the center of the massive room, while hundreds of alien creatures stared down at him from their floating seats. Deho looked around at the beings who thought they ruled the galaxy. There was the Vorthak Prime Minister, who looked like a giant bug with too many legs and eyes that never blinked. The Zephyrian representative was just a ball of moving light inside a clear container that hummed when it talked. The Cronin delegate had scales like a snake and breathed poison gas that came out in little puffs. These aliens had called themselves the masters of the galaxy for thousands of years. They made the rules and everyone else had to follow them or get punished. Earth had been trying to be friends with them for 50 long years, giving them everything they asked for and getting nothing good back. The Vorthak clicked its scary mouthparts and began to read from a long list written on metal sheets. The sound it made was like nails on glass, but the translator machine made it into words that Deho could understand even though he wished he could not. Your species called humanity has been found guilty of many crimes against the natural order of the galaxy, the bug creature said in its cold metal voice. You have grown too fast and learned too much without asking permission. You build things that are too big and think thoughts that are too dangerous. You refuse to bow down to your betters and accept your place as servants. Deho felt his hands shake, with anger, but he kept them still at his sides. He thought about all the human colonies that had been attacked by council ships, all the trade routes that had been blocked all the times. Earth had been forced to pay huge amounts of money just to buy basic supplies. The Council had been slowly choking humanity for years, trying to make them weak and desperate. We have done everything you asked, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. We shared our medicine that saved millions of your people. We gave you our food-growing secrets that ended hunger on 12 worlds. We sent you our best art and music and stories. We helped build your space stations and fix your broken ships. What we will not do is get on our knees and pretend you are gods. The energy being in the crystal box started flashing angry red colors. Your words prove exactly why you are dangerous, it said in a voice like singing electricity. Lesser species must know their place in the great chain of being. You are young and stupid and need wise guidance. You will accept your role as servants and workers, or you will be thrown out of civilized space forever. Deho looked up at the thousands of aliens watching him. Some looked curious, like they had never seen a human refuse orders before. Others looked angry and wanted to see him punished. Most just looked bored, like this was something that happened every day. The worst part was seeing the few aliens who looked sad, like they knew this was wrong but were too scared to speak up. He remembered his daughter Minji back on Earth, who was only 8 years old and loved to draw pictures of the stars. She always asked him when she could visit the beautiful alien world she saw in books. Now he would have to tell her that those worlds would never welcome humans because humans were too proud to be slaves. The ancient Gellan emperor spoke next. His voice was so old and tired, it sounded like wind through dead leaves. Humanity thinks it is special because it learns fast and builds new things, but we have seen 1,000 species like you rise and fall. You all make the same mistake, thinking you can change the way things have always been. The strong rule and the weak serve. This is the law of nature. And the law of the galaxy. Deho wanted to laugh at the old creature. The Galactic Council was not strong. They were just old. They had been in power so long they forgot what it was like to work hard or try new things. They lived off the work of younger species, While giving nothing back but rules and punishments, the vote came faster than Deho expected. Each species had to say yes or no to kicking humanity out of the inner galaxy. The core species all voted yes, without even thinking about it. They had already decided before the trial even started. The client species voted yes because they were too afraid to say no. Only 3 small species voted to let humanity stay, and their votes did not count for much. The Vorthak stood up on its many legs and read the final judgment. By the ancient laws of the Galactic Council, humanity is hereby banished from all civilized systems. You have 30 days to remove all your people and belongings from Council space. You are forbidden from using our trade, routes, our communication networks, or our star charts. You will have no contact with any Council member species. Any human found in our territory after the deadline will be captured and sold as a slave. The words hit Deho like a punch to the stomach. 30 days to move billions of people and all their belongings. Away from worlds that had been human homes for generations. Away from the galaxy they had dreamed of exploring and making friends in. Away from everything they had worked so hard to build, but as the shock wore off, something else started growing in his chest. It was not fear or sadness. It was something that felt almost like relief, like a heavy chain had just been broken. For 50 years, humanity had been trying to fit into a system that was designed to keep them small and weak. They had been so busy trying to please their alien masters that they had forgotten what they could do. When they were free, "I need to ask you one question," he said to the assembled council. "Why are you really doing this to us?" The question caught them off guard. Several aliens started talking at once in their different languages, making a noise like a zoo at feeding time. "We have told you why," the Vorthak said finally. "You are dangerous and refuse to obey," No, Deho said with a small smile. "That is not the real reason you are afraid of us. You are afraid that other species will see what humans can do when we stop trying to make you happy. You are afraid they will start asking why they need you at all." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Deho had ever heard. "Then we accept your judgment," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the Great Hall. "We will leave your civilized space and go to the wild frontier that you are too scared to explore. And when we build something better than what you have here, we will remember this day. We will remember that you chose to make us your enemies, instead of your friends." Deho walked out of the crystal hall. He felt lighter than he had in years. Behind him, the council was already arguing about what to do next, but he did not care. They had just given humanity the greatest gift possible. They had set them free. Governor Sang-Ho stood at the top of the crystal tower that reached into the purple sky of New Terra and looked down at the city that had grown around its base. 5 years ago, this had been empty land, covered with strange blue grass and silver trees now. It was home to 3 million humans living in buildings that seemed to grow from the earth itself, like metal and glass flowers. The city was nothing like the cramped settlements humans had been allowed to build in council space. Those had been small and ugly, with strict rules about how tall buildings could be and how much energy people could use. Here on New Terra, the only limit was human imagination, and the results were breathtaking. Towers spiraled upward like DNA helixes connected by bridges that looked like frozen waterfalls. Gardens hung in the air between buildings fed by streams that flowed upward, defying gravity. Parks floated on platforms of crystallized energy, where children played games that would have been impossible on any other world. The whole city hummed with clean power drawn from the dimensional rifts that Dr. Yunji had learned to tap Ji1. His assistant came running up the stairs with a data pad clutched in her hands. Her face was bright with excitement, like it always was when she brought good news. "Governor, the latest reports from the agricultural zones are incredible," she said, breathing hard from her climb. "Our food production has increased by 600% since we stopped using council approved growing methods." Sang-Ho smiled, but he was not surprised. Everything they had been taught about proper farming had been designed to keep them dependent on alien food suppliers. Dr. Chan Wu had figured that out within the first month of settlement. When he ignored the council guidelines and let human creativity loose, the results had been amazing. The breakthrough had come when Chan Wu realized that the soil on New Terra was not really soil at all. It was a living substance that responded. to thoughts and emotions. When farmers worked with love and hope instead of just following mechanical procedures, the plants grew stronger and healthier. The blue grass that covered the planet was actually a network of connected organisms that shared nutrients and information across entire continents. But the real miracle was happening underground. In the deep caves beneath New Terra City, teams of explorers had found something that changed everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The Deep ruins were not just on one dead world, they were everywhere, hidden beneath the surface of dozens of planets in the Kepler cluster, waiting for someone smart enough to find them. Dr. Minho had spent 3 years mapping the underground structures, and what he found made his hands shake with excitement. The ancient race that had built these ruins had not just been advanced, they had been free. Really, truly free in a way that no species in the current galaxy could imagine. They had no government, no rulers, no one telling them what they could or could not do. Minho explained to the gathered scientists in his underground laboratory. Instead, they had something better. They had a network of cooperation that spanned thousands of worlds. Every individual was free to pursue their own dreams while contributing to the greater good of all. The technology they left behind was like nothing in the known galaxy. Machines that could turn thoughts into reality, energy sources that drew power from the spaces between atoms, materials that could change their properties based on what was needed, transportation systems that could move entire cities across the galaxy. In the blink of an eye, young engineer He Jin was the first human to successfully activate one of the ancient devices. She had been working alone in the ruins when she found a small crystal that seemed to pulse with inner light. When she touched it, her mind was suddenly filled with visions of the galaxy, as it had been millions of years ago. She saw worlds covered with cities that looked like living art beings who could reshape matter with their thoughts, ships that sailed between the stars, like leaves on a cosmic wind, a network of energy that connected every world, every mind, every dream into a symphony of endless possibility. It is still there, she whispered when the vision faded. The network is still active, waiting for someone to use it again. Within weeks, human engineers were working around the clock to understand and rebuild the ancient systems. The crystal He Jin had found was not just a device, it was a key that unlocked secrets that had been hidden for millions of years. The first test of the transportation network was terrifying and wonderful. At the same time, Dr. Seok Jin volunteered to be the first human to travel through the ancient system. He stepped onto a platform covered with glowing symbols, and suddenly he was somewhere else, standing on a world 3 star systems away in a chamber identical to the one he had left. The communications came next. Taimin, who had invented the quantum communication system during the Exodus, found ways to connect it to the ancient network. Suddenly, human colonies that were light years apart could talk to each other as easily as neighbors. But the most important discovery was not about technology, it was about freedom. The ancient race had left behind more than just machines. They had left behind an idea. The idea that intelligence should not be controlled, or limited, or forced into boxes labeled acceptable and unacceptable. This changed how humans built their new civilization. Instead of copying the council system with rulers and subjects, they created something new. Communities where everyone had a voice, where decisions were made by those who would be affected by them, where innovation was encouraged instead of feared. The results were visible everywhere. New Terra City was just the beginning. Human settlements were sprouting across the Kepler cluster, each one unique and beautiful in its own way. Some were built in the clouds of gas giant moons, others floated in the oceans of water worlds. A few were carved into the hearts of asteroids, where families lived in crystal caves lit by their own inner fire. Agriculture flourished as humans learned to work with alien ecosystems instead of trying to replace them. Engineering advanced by leaps and bounds as builders were free to experiment with impossible designs. Art exploded into forms that had never been seen before as creative minds were unleashed from artificial constraints. Science made breakthroughs daily as researchers could finally study whatever interested them without asking permission from bureaucrats who understood nothing. Dr. Yuna discovered new forms of medicine by studying how the living soil of New Terra healed itself. Professor Dalho found ways to generate clean energy by tapping into the planet magnetic field. Most importantly, humans were happy. In council space, they had always felt like they were missing something. like there was a part of themselves they were not allowed to use. Here in the frontier, that missing part had awakened. Children grew up believing they could become anything they dreamed of because they saw adults around them doing exactly that. Families were stronger because they had chosen to be together instead of being forced by economic necessity. Communities were peaceful because people felt heard and valued. The Kepler cluster was becoming something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization based on freedom instead of control, growth instead of stability, innovation instead of tradition. And at the center of it all were humans who had been exiled for being too dangerous to control. Governor Sang-ho looked out over his impossible city and smiled. The council had tried to punish humanity by sending them away from civilization. Instead, they had given them the chance to build something better than civilization, something truly free.